Today you will be with me in paradise. It's hard to realize that it's already been 30 years. But it was 30 years ago that we were blessed with a movie that came out, and the movie was entitled The Field of Dreams, starring Kevin Costner when he was much, much younger. It's hard to believe that that film is already 30 years old. And if you've never watched it, well, you should before you die. The Field of Dreams, where the question is asked twice, both at the beginning of the movie and at the end. Is this heaven? And Kevin Costner replies to the baseball player who turns out to be his dad. No, it's Iowa. Is this heaven? And then Kevin replies, no, it's Iowa. Except at the end of the movie, why, when Kevin immediately says, no, it's Iowa, he pauses and he says, well, maybe it is. Maybe this is heaven. Today, Jesus says to the criminal hanging by his side, and he says to you and I, on this, the feast of Christ the King, today you will be with me in paradise. Notice Jesus doesn't say to the criminal, when you die, which of course for the criminal was going to be today. He doesn't say tomorrow. He doesn't say sometime in the future. No, Jesus is very clear. What he says to the criminal and what he says to you and I. Today, you will be with me in paradise. Because that's what God's kingdom truly is. In the movie Field of Dreams, Kevin keeps hearing a voice that says, if you build it, they will come. And so he sets his work to building a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield. If you build it, they will come. So Jesus, on this feast of Christ the King, he chooses to be our king, and he chooses to build a kingdom that is unlike any kingdom that you and I have seen or experienced. Because it's not a kingdom of power, and it's not a kingdom of lording it over others, and it's not a kingdom of war and violence. It's not a kingdom of retaliation and revenge. It's a kingdom of humility. It's a kingdom of service. It's a kingdom of kindness. It's a kingdom of healing. It's a kingdom of acceptance. It's a kingdom of reaching out. It's a kingdom of service. It's a kingdom of ultimately giving of himself on the cross so that today you and I might be with him in paradise. Is this heaven? Well, I believe it is. Whenever we experience that which is God's kingdom, whenever we choose to help build this kingdom that Jesus has ushered in for us, it is said that love is the foretaste of paradise. Love is the foretaste of paradise. Now, this is not the love that country western singers chant about. This is not the love that necessarily poets write poems about. It's a love that is divine. It's a love that recognizes the truth that is so hard for you and I to embrace, and that is this: we cannot save ourselves. Not even Jesus chose to save himself. And notice in the gospel we just heard for this feast of Christ the King, everybody is telling Jesus as he's hanging upon the cross to do what? Save yourself. If you are the Christ, the Son of God, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, save yourself. Even the other criminal who's rebuking him says, save yourself and us. Save yourself. That's not what God's kingdom is about. And yet, the world in which we live in the cutthroat world of business, says, look out for number one. And even you and I, when we are giving gentle admonitions to our friends and our family and fellow parishioners, what oftentimes do we say to them? Take care of yourself. We use that phrase way too often. Take care of yourself. As though somehow it's an independent business and work that needs to be done. And yet that oftentimes is our mindset, isn't it? Well, my friends, that is not the kingdom that we are invited to celebrate on this feast of Christ the King, nor is it the kingdom that we are invited to help build here on earth. No, it's not a kingdom about saving ourselves or taking care of ourselves or only worrying about ourselves. Jesus had none of that. It was always about, even while suffering and hanging upon the cross, helping others, saving others, forgiving others, understanding others. That was the life of Christ. That is his kingdom that you and I are invited to live in and to embrace and to help build. And I believe that if we help build it each and every day, by being instruments of forgiveness, and by being instruments of compassion, and by being instruments of humility and of service to one another, putting others before ourselves, why then, if people were to come up and to ask us the question, is this heaven? We might be able to say to him, well, not in its fullest sense, but it's a foretaste of it, because we're sharing and we're receiving the gift of divine love. A love that indeed is a kingdom that we all seek to live in and to share with one another. So let us on this feast of Christ the King choose not to save ourselves, choose not even though we're told oftentimes to take care of ourselves, but let us be about the work of caring for one another, of helping one another, of lifting up one another, of being an advocate for one another, of being Christ for one another. And if we build that kingdom, they will certainly come.